The monitoring station detected the anomaly at 0417 Concordate Standard Time. A single data stream, one among millions that flowed through the Galactic Concordate's relay network, simply terminated. No error code, no distress beacon, no diagnostic cascade. The Vorathi home system, a civilization of 4.3 billion souls, stopped transmitting in the middle of a weather report. Observant Maresh Cole reviewed the logs 3 times, her crystalline form refracting the pale blue light of her workstation into fractured rainbows across the monitoring chamber walls. As a Tethrani, she experienced time as a river with visible currents past, present and future flowing simultaneously through her perception. But the Vorathi silence created something she had never encountered. A blank space in the stream, a void where future transmissions should have been visible. She filed an automated inquiry. Standard protocol for communication disruptions. Solar flares, relay malfunctions and administrative errors happened weekly across a galaxy of 10,000 member civilizations. The inquiry returned 6 hours later with a status that chilled the quantum matrices of her consciousness. All automated systems operational. No response to hail. No biological activity signatures detected on standard scans. Power consumption nominal. Life support systems active. The Vorathi were not dead. Their stations hummed with power. Their cities glowed in the darkness of space. Their ships maintained orbital positions with perfect precision. But nobody was home. Maresh escalated the report to Sentinel Primus Vokath, Director of Concordat Security. Within the hour, the investigation expanded. Within the day, the pattern emerged. The Vorathi were not alone. The emergency session of the Galactic Concordat convened 31 hours after the first silence. The Grand Assembly Chamber, a cathedral of architectural ambition that orbited the neutral moon of Sanctum Prime, filled with representatives from across known space. Beings of crystalline thought, liquid consciousness, and biological matter gathered in the tiered galleries, their translation fields creating a low hum of converted language. Sentinel Primus Vokath stood at the central podium, his silicon-based form reflecting the chamber's lighting like polished obsidian. The Mechari collective consciousness typically spoke with the measured calm of 1,000 minds thinking in unison. Today his voice carried an edge of something that might have been fear. 17 star systems, he said, and the chamber fell silent. 17 civilizations, 42 billion individuals, all silent. The holographic display above the podium showed the silent zone in 3 dimensions, a perfect sphere, 40 light-years in diameter, with 17 systems scattered throughout its volume. Each system glowed amber, the Concordat's designation for anomalous but not confirmed hostile. At the geometric center of the sphere, a single blue marker pulsed, Earth. The murmur that rippled through the assembly carried the weight of suspicion. Earth, the youngest member species. Earth, whose admission to the Concordat had been controversial just 8 months prior. Earth, whose single representative now stood at the lower petitioner's platform, waiting to be recognized. Dr. Elena Vasquez wore the simple dark blue uniform of the Earth Concordat delegation. She was small by the standards of most assembled species, barely 1.7 meters tall, with black hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of weathered face that spoke of long years spent in difficult places. Her doctorate in xenopsychology had taken her to 12 alien worlds before she'd turned 40. Her work with trauma survivors after the Martian collapse had earned her the grudging respect of species that measured experience in centuries. She did not look afraid. She looked tired. Earth recognizes the geometric concern, Dr. Vasquez said when Vokath gestured for her to speak. Her voice, translated into a dozen simultaneous linguistic formats, remained calm and precise. We have conducted comprehensive sensor reviews of all data collected by Earth-operated stations and vessels in the past 40 standard days. We are sharing everything unredacted with Concordat intelligence. She touched her data pad, and the holographic display shifted. New layers of information overlaid the silent zone, Earth's deep space sensor network, commercial shipping routes, scientific observation posts, and the handful of human-operated relay stations scattered through local space. We detected nothing unusual, she continued. No energy signatures, no exotic particle cascades, no gravitational anomalies, no coherent transmissions of any kind. Whatever caused the silences, our instruments did not register it. Or, a voice called from the upper galleries, Earth's instruments are calibrated to ignore what Earth itself created. The speaker was Council Member Thresh of the Colovian Defense Sphere, a species with a long military tradition and longer memories. Their territory bordered the silent zone. Their fear was understandable. Dr. Vasquez met Thresh's compound eyes without flinching. If Earth possessed a weapon capable of incapacitating 17 civilizations simultaneously across 40 light-years of space, Council member, we would not have spent the last 8 months negotiating trade agreements. We would have simply taken what we wanted. The bluntness of the statement sent another ripple through the assembly. Most species approached conflict through layers of diplomatic euphemism. Humanity's directness remained unsettling even to allies. The question stands, Vokoth said, his collective consciousness passing thousands of data threads simultaneously. Why is Earth unaffected? 17 systems fall silent. 17 civilizations with advanced technology, established infrastructure, and sophisticated detection networks. Yet Earth, at the geometric center, continues as if nothing has changed. Statistically, this correlation demands explanation. Maresh Cole stepped forward from her position at the observer's station, her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved. If I may offer perspective, she said, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones of her species. I have reviewed transmission patterns from all affected systems. The silences occurred sequentially over 72 hours, beginning with systems closest to Earth and radiating outward. Yet in each case, the final transmissions showed no distress, no alarm, no indication of awareness that anything unusual was occurring. She gestured, and the holographic display replayed the final transmission from the Vorathi system. It was a weather report, mundane and routine. High-pressure system moving toward the southern continent. Expect clear conditions for the next 3 rotations. Agricultural yields projected at. The voice simply stopped. Mid-sentence, mid-word. Then 7 seconds of silence. Then a sound. Soft. Almost inaudible beneath the background noise of the transmission equipment. Someone breathing. Slowly. Peacefully. Then nothing. They did not die, Maresh said quietly. They stopped. Chief Engineer Marcus Ramirez had spent 32 years maintaining life support systems in deep space stations. He'd worked on asteroid mining platforms, scientific outposts, and commercial hubs scattered across human-occupied space. He understood the language of machines better than the language of diplomacy, which was why he found himself deeply uncomfortable in the Concordate's technical briefing room, surrounded by alien engineers whose biosignatures alone made his environmental suit sensors complain. But Sentinel Primus Vokoth had specifically requested a human systems expert, and when the Concordate's security director asked, "You showed up. Here's what's strange," Ramirez said, pulling up his analysis on the central display. "Power consumption in the silent systems hasn't changed. I mean, it's varied within normal parameters, lighting cycles, temperature control, the usual automated stuff, but there's no drop-off in usage, no spike that might indicate emergency systems kicking in. It's just steady." He highlighted a particular data stream from the Vorathi primary orbital station. "This is life support. See this pattern? That's the station maintaining atmospheric composition for approximately 4,000 inhabitants. The system's doing its job, scrubbing CO2, generating oxygen, regulating temperature, the whole 9 yards." One of the Concordate engineers, a Neshri with 6 articulated manipulator limbs, made a gesture that Ramirez's translator rendered as confusion. "Then the inhabitants are alive. Why no response?" "That's the thing," Ramirez said, zooming in on another data subset. "Look at water consumption, food replicator usage, waste reclamation. All of it's dropped to near zero. These systems are maintaining an atmosphere for 4,000 people who aren't eating, drinking, or, well, doing anything that generates biological waste." He let that sink in for a moment. "It's like," he continued, "someone put the lights on a timer but forgot to turn off the coffee maker. The station's maintaining conditions for life, but nobody's living anymore. They're just existing." The room fell silent. Ramirez scratched his beard, uncomfortable with the attention. "I've seen plenty of automated systems," he added, "stations that run themselves for months without crew. But those places feel empty. Power consumption drops. Systems go into standby mode. The whole station hibernates. This feels like everyone just decided to stop moving, all at once, while the station just keeps doing its job around them." Vokoth silicon form refracted the briefing room's light into sharp-edged shadows. "Your analysis confirms physical survival. Whatever afflicts these populations, it is not biological death." "Yeah," Ramirez said. "They're alive. They're just not home anymore." Lem of the Deepening resided in the archives beneath Sanctum Prime's surface, where the collected memory of 4,000 years of galactic civilization was stored in quantum matrices that never forgot and never lied. As a Kresh, his entire species had evolved around the concept of memory. Their bodies were adapted to their aquatic homeworld's unique properties, which allowed perfect neural preservation across generations. Lem personally carried the memories of 8047 ancestors, a chain of consciousness stretching back before the Concordate's founding. He floated in his specialized environment chamber, his translucent form surrounded by the gentle currents of precisely maintained water, and searched for patterns. Great quiets, he thought, pulling records that most species had forgotten, times when civilizations vanished without violence. The first reference was 2,847 standard years old, the Kethran Unity, a spacefaring civilization that had achieved fusion power and established colonies on 6 worlds. Their transmission simply ended over a period of 3 weeks. When neighboring species finally investigated 17 years later, interstellar travel being slower in that epoch, they found functioning cities, preserved food, and populations that appeared to be sleeping, alive but unreachable. After 2 years of failed revival attempts, the neighboring species had quietly sealed the systems and declared them quarantined. The second reference came from 1,423 years ago, the Prism Concordance, a collective of crystalline entities that had traded with younger species for centuries. Their consciousness fragmented simultaneously across their entire network. No distress, no violence, just a transformation from unified awareness to peaceful silence. The third reference was more recent, 289 years ago, the Stellarch Communion, a hive mind species that had contributed significant advances to biological engineering. Their collective consciousness reported feeling an overwhelming sense of contentment, followed by a desire to simply stop expanding, stop exploring, stop striving. Within months, their civilization had entered what they described as eternal rest. Their systems still functioned, their bodies remained alive, but the driving force behind their civilization had chosen to sleep. Lem compiled the data and presented it to the Emergency Intelligence Committee, with a sense of profound unease rippling through his ancestral memories. "This is not new," he reported. "This pattern has occurred at least 3 times in recorded history, perhaps more, in eras before the Concordiate's formation, when record-keeping was fragmented." Dr. Vasquez sat across from him in the committee chamber, her expression unreadable. "Were any of the affected species ever revived?" "No," Lem said. "All attempts failed. In some cases, the affected individuals were physically removed from their environments and stimulated through various means: medical intervention, neural induction, even pain response. In every case, the affected individuals showed no response beyond maintaining basic biological functions." "Catatonia," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "I am unfamiliar with this term. A state of apparent consciousness without responsiveness. The body lives, but the mind is..." She paused, her fingers drumming once against the table in a gesture Lem had learned indicated human stress. In human medical contexts, catatonia can sometimes be reversed, but not always, and not easily. Sentinel Primus Vocath's collective consciousness processed the historical data through 1,000 analytical frameworks simultaneously. This implies a natural phenomenon, a recurring cosmic condition that affects sufficiently advanced civilizations. Or, Maresh Cole added from her position at the chamber's periphery, her temporal perception allowing her to see the conversation's threads extending into multiple possible futures, a recurring entity, something that returns cyclically to do this. The time gaps between incidents, 2,847 years, 1,423 years, 289 years. The intervals are decreasing. The mathematics were inescapable. If the pattern continued, the next event should have occurred roughly 70 years ago. Instead, it was happening now. The phenomenon was accelerating. The debate that consumed the next 6 hours would later be studied in diplomatic academies as a case study in species-level fear response. 70% of concordant member species advocated immediate quarantine, seal the silence zone completely, allow no traffic in or out, monitor the boundaries for expansion. If the affected systems remain stable, maintain the quarantine indefinitely. Tragic, but acceptable. 17 civilizations lost was catastrophic, but risking the entire galaxy was unthinkable. 20% advocated for observation only. Send automated probes, collect data remotely, attempt no physical intervention. Knowledge was valuable, but not worth the lives it might cost to obtain. 8% advocated for complete withdrawal. Some species began quietly recalling ships and closing embassies, preparing to retreat to their core territories if the phenomenon spread. 2%, exactly 6 member species advocated for direct investigation. One of those species was human. Soft voice in Twilight, the Ashari diplomat, whose empathic abilities made her one of the Concordate's most effective mediators, stood at the council floor and did something extremely rare for her species. She raised her voice. "We cannot abandon 42 billion souls," she said, her usually gentle tone carrying an edge of anguish. "To quarantine them is to declare them dead without confirmation. To walk away is to betray every principle the Concordat was founded upon. And to enter the silent zone is to risk joining them," Council Member Thresh countered. "We cannot help them if we become victims ourselves." "Then send those who are willing to take that risk," Dr. Vasquez said, standing at her platform. All eyes turned toward her. "Earth volunteers." The chamber erupted in crosstalk, translation fields overlapping into a cacophony of linguistic chaos. Volkath's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Explain." Dr. Vasquez touched her datapad, and a new display appeared above the assembly. A personnel roster. 300 names. Human names. "Scientists, engineers, medical personnel and support staff," she said. "All volunteers, all fully briefed on the risks, all willing to enter the silence zone to investigate and, if possible, render aid." "This is suicide," someone called from the galleries. "Perhaps," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "But consider, 17 civilizations fell silent over 72 hours. Earth, at the center of the phenomenon, remains unaffected. This suggests either immunity or, more likely, the phenomenon does not target humans. We don't know why. But empirically, we have the best chance of entering the zone and returning." Maresh Cole felt the future possibilities crystallize around Dr. Vasquez's proposal. Most timelines led to human casualties, but a slim thread of possibility showed something else: humans entering where others could not, moving through the silence zone like divers entering deep water, and returning with knowledge. Why would Earth risk this? Volkath asked, genuine curiosity threading through his collective consciousness. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer, carrying something that the translation fields struggled to convey, a quality that might have been grief, or might have been determination, or might have been something uniquely human that had no proper word. "Because 42 billion beings are suffering," she said simply, "or lost, or trapped. We don't know, but we know they need help, and when someone needs help, you go. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's terrifying. You go, because if you don't, you have to live with the knowledge that you could have tried and chose not to." Soft voice in Twilight's empathic senses registered the emotional undercurrent in Dr. Vasquez's words, a deep old pain, something personal, a loss that had carved out space in her psyche and filled it with an absolute refusal to abandon others. "I cannot enter the silence zone," soft voice in Twilight said quietly. "My empathic sensitivity would overwhelm me if I encountered 42 billion minds in whatever state they are in. I would be paralyzed by their experience. But I support Earth's proposal. Let those who can help, help." The vote, when it came, was narrow, but it passed. Humanity would enter the silence zone. The civilian transport Perseverance crossed the boundary of the silence zone 6 days later, carrying the first investigation team, 12 humans, 1 Mikari observer, a small subdivision of Volkath's consciousness, and enough equipment to establish a temporary research station. Commander Ikena Okonkwo, a veteran of the Martian collapse rescue operations, led the team. She had spent 3 years pulling survivors from sealed habitat modules after the atmospheric processing failure that had killed 9,000 colonists. She knew what it meant to work in silence, surrounded by the dead and dying. She knew how to keep moving when every instinct screamed to flee. The team's first destination was the Vorathi Primary Orbital Station, the same facility Chief Engineer Ramirez had analyzed from afar. As Perseverance approached, the station's running lights gleamed in the darkness, and automated systems sent standard docking clearance codes. Everything appeared normal. Commander Okonkwo led her team through the airlock and into the station's main concourse. The smell hit first. Not decay, nothing was rotting, but the scent of thousands of bodies in close proximity, skin oils, breath, the faint musk of life, and beneath it, something else, something that might have been incense or perfume or cleaning solution. The station's environmental systems were working, but they couldn't quite mask the overwhelming presence of inhabited space. The second thing they noticed was the warmth. The station's temperature control was calibrated for Vorathi physiology, several degrees warmer than standard human comfort. The air felt heavy, almost drowsy. The third thing was the people. They found the first group in the concourse's central plaza, 47 Vorathi, arranged in what might have been a social gathering. Some sat on benches, others stood in loose clusters. All of them were alive, chests rising and falling with slow, steady breaths, eyes open, faces relaxed, but none of them moved. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to any political Chens, approached the nearest Vorathi cautiously. She was the team's xenobiologist, trained in first contact protocols and emergency medicine. She took out her scanner and ran a full biometric analysis. Vitals are stable, she reported. Her voice kept deliberately neutral, heart rate low but within normal range for resting state. Neural activity present. But she frowned at the readings. Brain activity is almost entirely concentrated in the limbic system and the Vorathi equivalent of the default mode network. The regions associated with executive function, decision-making and active cognition are barely active. Can they hear us? Commander Okonkwo asked. Dr. Chen tried various stimuli, verbal address, light touch, louder sounds. The Vorathi showed no response. Their expressions never changed. Serene, peaceful content. Over the next 4 hours, the investigation team explored the station. They found Vorathi everywhere, in residential quarters, workspaces, recreational facilities. They found half-eaten meals, abandoned datapads still displaying mid-sentence messages, children frozen in mid-laugh. The entire station was a snapshot of a civilization that had simply stopped. One particular discovery haunted the team, a nursery unit with 17 Vorathi children, all under the age of 5 by human equivalents. They sat or stood in complete stillness, their small faces showing the same peaceful contentment as the adults. Dr. Chen stood in the doorway of that nursery for a long time, her jaw tight. We need to try revival protocols, she said finally. They did. They tried medical stimulation, neural induction, even carefully calibrated pain response. The Vorathi showed no reaction beyond autonomic reflexes. When placed in a chair, they remained seated. When laid down, they remained prone. When left standing, they stood until gently guided to a seated position. They were alive, conscious, in some technical sense, but they were not there. The team established their research station in one of the orbital facility's empty cargo bays and began systematic documentation. Commander Okonkwo insisted on protocols. They would maintain the station, feed the Vorathi who would eat when food was placed in their mouths but would not seek it out, ensure medical care and document everything. We're not here to study specimens, she told her team on the third day. We're here as hospice workers. Until we understand what's happened and how to reverse it, our job is to maintain dignity and care. It was a small distinction, but it mattered. News of the team's work reached the Concordat within hours. The images they transmitted, humans gently feeding catatonic Vorathi, maintaining their living spaces, documenting their cultures through preserved records, created a strange dissonance in alien minds. Humanity, the species known for its capacity for violence, was demonstrating an equal capacity for tenderness in the face of incomprehensible loss. Maresh Kaul watched the transmissions from her monitoring station and felt her temporal perception fracture slightly. She saw Commander Okonkwo reading a Vorathi children's story to the unresponsive children in the nursery, her voice steady and calm. She saw Dr. Chen carefully braiding the hair equivalent of a young Vorathi female, maintaining grooming that the victim could no longer perform. She saw humans grieving for aliens they had never met, and she began to understand something fundamental about the species at the center of the silence zone. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the Makuri Observer subdivision that had accompanied the human team. As a fragment of Vokath's collective consciousness, it maintained constant data link with the primary collective, feeding real-time observations back to Concordia intelligence. On the 18th day of the investigation, it detected something. A pattern in the background electromagnetic noise of the silence zone. Not quite random, not quite coherent. Something that might have been signal, or might have been artifact. But it was present in all 17 systems, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost biological. Vokath's primary collective analyzed the data and cross-referenced it with every known phenomenon in the Concordat's extensive scientific database. The pattern matched nothing in conventional physics, but when compared to theoretical models of dark matter interactions, a correlation emerged. Dark matter filaments, invisible structures that threaded through the galaxy like neurons in a vast brain, were known to exist. They were gravitationally detectable but had never shown signs of organized behavior. They were considered the passive scaffolding of cosmic structure, nothing more. But the pattern Vokath detected suggested something impossible. The dark matter network in the silence zone was active, pulsing, communicating. The hypothesis was presented to the Emergency Intelligence Committee with significant uncertainty margins. You're suggesting, Dr. Vasquez said slowly, that dark matter is conscious. Not precisely, Vokath replied. Consciousness as biological entities understand it requires substrate, neurons, quantum matrices, something to process information. But the pattern we detect shows organized information transfer, purpose, and that organization correlates precisely with the boundaries of the silence zone.
lem of the deepening added historical context. The three previous Great Quiets occurred in regions we now know to have dense dark matter filament structures. At the time, the connection was not made because the technology to detect such structures did not exist. So what? Commander Okonkwo asked via comlink from the Vorathi station. Are we dealing with an entity, a phenomenon, a cosmic immune system? No one had an answer. Dr. Vasquez made a decision that would later be studied as either brilliance or recklessness. We need to communicate with it. The suggestion was met with immediate objection. Attempting contact with an unknown entity that had incapacitated 42 billion beings was, in the assessment of most concordant species, suicidal. But Dr. Vasquez pressed her case. Every attempt to revive the affected individuals has failed. We cannot solve this through medicine or technology. If the dark matter network is responsible, if it's in any sense aware, then negotiation may be our only option. And if there's even a chance of restoring these civilizations, we have to try. Soft voice in twilight supported the proposal, though her empathic senses warned her of danger she could not articulate. If there is consciousness there, she said, then there may be the capacity for communication, for understanding. The vote passed, barely. The task of developing a communication protocol fell to a joint team, human linguists, Tathrani temporal specialists who could model probabilistic communication frameworks, and Makari information theorists who understood pattern recognition at quantum levels. It took 4 weeks. The protocol they developed was elegant in its simplicity, modulated gravitational waves, the only force that interacted predictably with dark matter. They would broadcast mathematical patterns, prime numbers, basic physical constants, geometric proofs, then wait for response. If the network was conscious, it would recognize the patterns as intentional. If it was merely a natural phenomenon, there would be no reaction. Dr. Vasquez insisted on being present for the first transmission attempt. Commander Okonkwo returned from the Vorathi station specifically to witness the event. Mareshkol observed with her temporal perception extended as far as possible into potential futures, trying to see what might come. The transmission array was set up on the edge of the silence zone, at the periphery where the dark matter density increased measurably. A small human vessel, the survey ship Endeavour, served as the transmission platform. At 14 Concord at standard time, the team began broadcasting.
Silence answered. They tried for 4 hours. Different patterns, different frequencies, different modulation schemes. Nothing. Dr. Vasquez was about to call for a break when her communications officer, Lieutenant Amara Jabari, suddenly stiffened. "Doctor," she said quietly, "we're receiving something." The signal came through the same gravitational wave detector they'd been using to transmit, but this time the waves weren't ones they'd sent. The pattern that emerged was complex, far more complex than their simple mathematical broadcasts. It would take weeks to fully decode, but the message's structure was immediately clear. It was a response. Organized, purposeful, intelligent. Something in the dark matter network was answering. The translation effort consumed every available expert. Tethrani mathematicians mapped the signal's temporal structures. Kresh linguists compared it to every known communication framework. Makari collectives passed the information layers, finding depth within depth. The signal was multidimensional, carrying meaning in frequency, amplitude, temporal spacing, and gravitational polarization simultaneously. It took 3 weeks to achieve partial comprehension. What they learned changed everything. The entity, and it was an entity, though calling it singular was inaccurate, referred to itself through a concept that translated poorly into biological language. The closest approximation the linguistic team could manage was the lullaby. Though that name carried connotations the entity itself might not have intended, the lullaby was emergent consciousness. Not biological, not artificial, simply emergent. It had formed from the dark matter network itself, patterns of gravitation and quantum coherence that had, over cosmic timescales, achieved something that might be called awareness, and its purpose, as it explained through weeks of patient communication, was mercy. Suffering is the price of consciousness. The lullaby communicated through gravitational whispers. All biological entities experience pain, loss, fear. The burden of awareness creates torment. We observe, we measure, and when a civilization reaches sufficient advancement, when consciousness becomes sophisticated enough to comprehend the vastness of its own insignificance, we offer relief. The communication continued, translated through layers of linguistic approximation. We do not harm, we do not destroy. We offer peace, eternal peace, release from the struggle of existence. The civilizations you call silent are not imprisoned. They are free, free from suffering, free from the terrible burden of choice. They rest in contentment, and they will rest forever. Dr. Vasquez read the translated message 3 times, her hands steady but her face pale. "It thinks it's helping them," she said quietly. Vokoth's collective consciousness processed the implications through 1,000 analytical frameworks. It perceives itself as a rescue mechanism, a cosmic hospice for civilizations that have evolved beyond the point where existence brings more suffering than joy. But they didn't choose it, Commander Okonkwo said via comlink. Her voice carried an edge that transcended translation. The Vorathi didn't ask to be rescued. The lullaby just decided for them. Maresh Kol's temporal perception showed her the branching futures with crystalline clarity. Most paths led to negotiation failure. Most led to the lullaby continuing its work, more civilizations falling silent over the coming centuries. A few paths showed violent confrontation, species attempting to destroy the dark matter network, failing catastrophically. But one thin thread showed something else, a possibility so fragile it might collapse at any moment. It required humanity to do what humanity did best, argue about suffering. The second phase of communication began with a question from Dr. Vasquez. What gives you the right to choose for them? The lullaby's response took 2 days to formulate. Whether due to the complexity of translation or the need to process the question's implications, no one could say. We observe suffering. We have the capacity to end it. To observe suffering and refuse to act is cruelty. We end cruelty. Dr. Vasquez composed her response carefully, consulting with philosophers, ethicists, and psychologists from a dozen species. When she transmitted, her words carried the weight of humanity's entire bloody history. Consciousness requires choice, she said. Without the ability to choose, including the choice to suffer, beings are not alive in any meaningful sense. You have not ended their suffering, you have ended them. The debate that followed would later be compiled into a document called The Dialogue, studied by every ethics student in the Concordat. It lasted 7 weeks. The lullaby presented its case. Suffering was measurable, quantifiable, and given sufficient advancement, inevitable. Biological civilizations were trapped in a cycle of pain, loss, and existential dread. The lullaby offered escape. Dr. Vasquez countered with humanity's experience. She spoke of the Black Death, which killed 1/3 of medieval Europe. She spoke of 2 world wars, nuclear weapons, and the centuries of conflict that had nearly destroyed human civilization a dozen times over. She spoke of the Martian collapse, of 9,000 dead colonists, and the survivors who had to keep living afterward. We have suffered, she said, immeasurably. For our entire existence we have endured loss and pain and horror, and yet we choose, every single day, to wake up, to continue, to build, to love, to create. Despite the suffering, we choose consciousness. Why? The lullaby's question resonated through gravitational waves. Why would any being choose pain over peace? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. When she finally responded, she spoke not as a diplomat or a scientist, but as a mother who had lost a daughter to the Martian collapse. Because the alternative is oblivion, she said softly. Consciousness, true consciousness, means experiencing everything, joy and suffering, connection and loss, hope and grief. If you take away the suffering, you take away the meaning. You cannot have love without the risk of loss. You cannot have joy without the knowledge that it will end. You cannot have hope without the presence of despair. She paused, collecting herself. My daughter died in the Martian collapse. She was 7 years old. The habitat module's life support failed, and by the time we reached them, she was gone. I held her body in my arms, and felt a pain so profound I thought I would die from it. I wanted to die from it. The communication channel was silent except for the soft hum of the transmission equipment. But I didn't die, Dr. Vasquez continued. I chose to keep living, because my daughter existed, because she laughed and played and asked impossible questions about the universe, because she mattered, and if I chose oblivion, chose to stop experiencing the pain of her absence, I would lose the memory of her joy. The suffering and the love are inseparable. You cannot eliminate one without destroying the other. Another long silence. Then the lullaby responded, we do not understand. We observe your physiology, stress hormones, elevated heart rate, pain response. Why would any being voluntarily maintain such a state? Because Dr. Vasquez said, we are not our pain, we are not our suffering, we are the choice to continue despite it. That is what makes us alive. The negotiation that followed was unprecedented in Concordat history. Vasquez, Commander Okonkwo, Maresh Kul, soft voice in twilight, Lem of the deepening, and a rotating panel of experts from across the galaxy engaged with the lullaby in the most profound philosophical debate ever conducted. The central question, did consciousness have the right to choose suffering? The lullaby's position was consistent. It perceived itself as ending cruelty. From its perspective, biological entities were trapped in a state of constant torment by the mere fact of their awareness. Offering peace was mercy, not imprisonment. Humanity's counter-argument was equally consistent. Choice was fundamental. Without the ability to choose, including choosing to suffer, beings lost the essential quality that made consciousness meaningful. But the breakthrough came when Commander Okonkwo made a suggestion born from her experience in disaster response. Ask them, she said simply, the ones you've put to sleep. Ask them if they want to stay asleep or wake up. The lullaby's response showed something that might have been confusion. They are at peace. They experience no desire. They would not choose to return to suffering. Then give them the choice and see, Commander Okonkwo said. If they truly prefer peace over consciousness, they will choose to remain as they are. But if consciousness, even with its suffering, holds value, they will choose to wake. You claim to offer mercy. Prove it by offering choice. The philosophical elegance of the argument cut through weeks of abstract debate. The lullaby could claim mercy, but without choice, it was simply imposing its will. The entity took 3 days to respond. When it did, the message was brief. We will allow inquiry. We will provide choice. We will learn. The awakening protocol took 2 months to develop. The lullaby would reduce its influence gradually, creating a threshold state where the affected individuals could register preference. Would they choose to remain in eternal peace or return to consciousness with all its attendant suffering? Dr. Vasquez insisted that the choice be truly free. No coercion, no artificial influence, no manipulation. The lullaby agreed, though it clearly believed the outcome was certain. Who would choose suffering over peace? The first trial was conducted on the Varathi orbital station, with a single volunteer, Citizen Thane, whose final transmission had been recovered months earlier. It's so beautiful. Why would we ever want to hurt again? Commander Okonkwo's team prepared the medical bay. Dr. Chen monitored Thane's neural activity as the lullaby gradually withdrew its influence. The process took 6 hours. For the first 4 hours, nothing changed. Thane remained in peaceful stasis, his expression serene. Then, slowly, brain activity increased. Executive function regions began firing. Memory centers activated. Emotional processing networks came online. Thane's eyes moved, just slightly, then focused. He looked at Dr. Chen, confusion flickering across his features. His mouth moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. Where am I? You're on the Varathi orbital station, Dr. Chen said gently. You've been unresponsive for 4 months. Do you remember what happened? Thane's confusion deepened. Then, slowly, memory seemed to return. Yes, I was working. And then, something changed. Like I could finally rest. After so much struggle, I could finally stop. You experienced the lullaby, Dr. Chen explained. An entity that offers peace by removing the burden of consciousness. You've been in stasis, but we're offering you a choice now. You can return to that state of peace, or you can fully wake up. Return to normal consciousness. Both options are available. Thane was silent for a long time. Dr. Chen could see him processing, weighing, considering. Finally, he spoke. If I return to peace, I won't experience anything. I won't know I exist. Correct, Dr. Chen said. You'll exist, but without awareness, without experience. You won't suffer, but you also won't be. You'll experience joy and pain, hope and fear, connection and loss. You'll be alive in every sense of the word. Thane closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his face, the first emotional response he'd shown in 4 months. I have a daughter, he said quietly, and a partner, and work I care about, and dreams I haven't fulfilled, and pain I've carried for years from losses I've experienced. He opened his eyes. I choose to wake up. I choose to carry that pain, because without it, I lose everything else. I lose who I am. The lullaby, monitoring through the dark matter network, registered the choice, and for the first time in its existence, it experienced something that might have been surprise. Across the silence zone, the awakening protocol expanded. 17 civilizations were given the choice, eternal peace or conscious suffering. 93% chose to wake up. The months that followed transformed the galaxy's understanding of consciousness itself. The lullaby, confronted with evidence that contradicted its fundamental purpose, entered what might be called existential crisis. If beings preferred suffering over peace, then its entire function as mercy giver was invalid. The solution came through compromise, a concept the lullaby had never encountered. Dr. Vasquez proposed the framework. The lullaby would no longer impose peace. Instead, it would offer. Any civilization that reached sufficient advancement to communicate would be presented with a choice: continue the struggle of consciousness or accept eternal rest. But the choice must be made collectively, democratically, and without coercion. And for civilizations that chose consciousness, the lullaby would serve a different function. It would observe, it would learn, it would document the experience of suffering, so that if any civilization in the future chose peace, they would do so from a place of full understanding. The agreement was formalized in what became known as the Quiet Protocol, but the aftermath revealed something unexpected. Of the 17 silenced civilizations, approximately 7% had chosen to remain asleep, not through coercion, but through genuine preference. Individuals who had experienced such profound suffering, trauma, loss, chronic pain, that oblivion seemed genuinely preferable to continuation. Dr. Vasquez stood in the Vorathi nursery one last time, 6 months after the first awakening. 16 of the 17 children had chosen consciousness. They were playing again, laughing, learning, living. One child, a young female named Sirin, had chosen differently. She had been present during a traumatic accident that killed her entire family. The memory was so overwhelming that when offered the choice, she had chosen peace. Her small body sat in the corner, breathing steadily, expression serene. She was alive, but she was not there. Dr. Chen stood next to Dr. Vasquez, both of them silent. Did we do the right thing? Dr. Chen stood next to Dr. Vasquez, both of them silent. Did we do the right thing? Chen asked quietly, giving them the choice. Dr. Vasquez thought about her daughter, about the choice she herself had made every day since the collapse, to wake up, to continue, to carry the grief. Yes, she said, because choice is what makes us alive, even when the choice is to stop living. The quiet protocol changed the Concordat in ways no one had anticipated. Humanity established what became known as grief stations, facilities dedicated to teaching other species how to process suffering without being destroyed by it. The concept seemed strange to species that had evolved with different emotional frameworks, but the results were undeniable. Species that learned human-style grief processing showed increased psychological resilience, better crisis response, and paradoxically, greater capacity for joy. Maresh Cole attended one such training session, curious about what humans could teach a species that experienced time non-linearly. The instructor was a human therapist named James Torres, who had spent 20 years working with disaster survivors. Grief, he explained to the mixed species class, is not the opposite of happiness. It's the evidence of love. You cannot grieve something that didn't matter. The depth of your pain measures the depth of your connection. Maresh felt something shift in her temporal perception. She had always experienced time as a river flowing in multiple directions, past and future equally visible. But grief, she realized, was exclusively linear. You could not grieve something before it was lost. Grief existed only in the present, moving forward. For the first time in her long existence, Maresh experienced a truly linear emotion. She grieved for the Vorathi child Seren, who had chosen oblivion, and in grieving, she became more fully present in the moment than she had ever been. This is how humans experience time, she realized. Locked in the present, carrying the past, unable to see the future, every moment unknown, every loss permanent, every choice irreversible. The weight of it was crushing and beautiful. The lullaby, now an accepted part of the cosmic community, continued its new role as observer. It documented suffering across the galaxy, not to end it, but to understand it, to preserve the memory of what consciousness cost. And occasionally, for those who truly could not continue, it offered its original mercy, eternal peace, but only when asked, only when chosen, only with full understanding of what would be lost. 5 years after the Silence Zone incident, the Galactic Concordat held a memorial service for the 2,947 individuals across 17 civilizations who had chosen not to wake up. Their names were recorded in the archive beneath Sanctum Prime, preserved forever in Krachesh's perfect memory. Lum of the Deepening personally oversaw the recording, ensuring that those who had chosen oblivion would not be forgotten by those who chose to remember. Dr. Elena Vasquez attended the memorial. She was older now. Grief and exhaustion had carved new lines into her face, but she remained Earth's primary liaison to the lullaby, coordinating the quiet protocol and ensuring that the choice remained free. Soft Voice in Twilight found her after the ceremony, standing alone in one of the station's observation galleries, looking out at the stars. "You carry great weight," the Ashari diplomat said gently, her empathic senses reading the complexity of Dr. Vasquez's emotional state. "Someone has to," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Is it worth it? The burden of helping others choose suffering over peace?" Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long time. "I think about my daughter every day," she said finally. "About the moment I knew she was gone. About the choice I made to keep living afterward. And I think about the 7 years I had with her before that moment. The joy, the love, the mundane, beautiful reality of her existence." She turned to look at Soft Voice in Twilight. "If someone had offered me a choice, experience those 7 years knowing they would end in unbearable pain, or never experience them at all, I would choose the pain, every time, because she was worth it. Consciousness is worth it, even when it hurts." Soft Voice in Twilight's empathic senses registered the truth of the statement, the profound conviction behind it. "Humanity has taught the galaxy something important," she said. "That suffering is not weakness, that choosing to continue despite pain is not foolishness. That consciousness, true consciousness, requires the capacity for grief. And what has the galaxy taught humanity?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Soft Voice in Twilight considered. "That you are not alone, that other species can learn to grieve as you do. that your capacity for enduring suffering is not a curse, but a gift you can share. The final scene in this chapter of galactic history occurred 3 months later, in a most unexpected place. A young Tethrani child named Prism of Morning attended her first grief station session. She had lost her parent Crystal to a mining accident, and the trauma had fractured her temporal perception. She could no longer see the future clearly. It had become clouded by the absence of her parent in all the timelines she could perceive. The human instructor, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had spent 6 months on the Vorathi station maintaining the catatonic, sat with Prism of Morning in a quiet room. "I can't see forward anymore," the young Tethrani said, her crystalline form dimming with distress. "My parents should be there, in every future, and they're not. It's just empty." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's grief. The absence of someone who should be present. It doesn't go away, but it changes. How? You learn to carry it. To integrate the absence into your sense of self. The empty space your parent left behind becomes part of your structure, and eventually you find that you can build around it, not filling it, you never fill it, but building alongside it." Prism of Morning's light flickered uncertainly. "Will I ever see the future clearly again? Honestly," Dr. Chen said, "I don't know. Human experience of time is different from yours, but I can tell you this. The pain you feel right now is evidence of how much your parent mattered. And that evidence is precious. It's worth carrying." The young Tethrani was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, her light began to stabilize. "Can you teach me," she asked, "how to carry it?" Dr. Chen smiled, sad and warm and human. "Yes, that's what we do here. We teach each other how to carry the weight of consciousness, how to wake up every day and choose to continue, how to grieve and how to live despite grief." She reached out and gently touched the edge of Prism of Morning's crystalline form. "Your parent would want you to continue," she said softly, "to experience everything, the pain and the joy and everything in between. That's what love means. Wanting someone to be fully alive, even when you can't be there with them." Prism of Morning's light brightened slightly, and for the first time since her parent's death, she could see a glimmer of future possibility. Not clear, not certain, but present. She could see forward again, and she chose to move toward it. In the years that followed, humanity's role in the Galactic Concordat solidified around a strange paradox. They were simultaneously the youngest member species and the most essential. When the Helicron disaster displaced 3 billion refugees, it was human crisis coordinators who organized the response, not because they were the most efficient, but because they knew how to function through collective trauma. When the merchant guilds faced economic collapse that would have caused mass starvation across 40 systems, it was human economists who designed the recovery framework, not because they had the best economic models, but because they had centuries of experience rebuilding after catastrophic failure. When the first interspecies war in 200 years threatened to break out over resource disputes, it was human mediators who negotiated the peace, not because they were neutral parties, but because they understood that all parties were operating from places of fear and pain, and that those emotions needed acknowledgement before solutions could emerge. The galaxy learned a strange truth. Humanity's history of suffering had prepared them to help others suffer productively, to grieve, to process, to continue despite overwhelming reasons to stop. The lullaby observed all of this, documenting the cost of consciousness with what might have been fascination, or might have been something closer to reverence. It had evolved from a force that ended suffering to a witness that honored it. And very occasionally, when a being made contact truly unable to continue, having exhausted every option, every hope, the lullaby still offered its original mercy. The choice to sleep, the choice to rest. But now it asked first, and now it understood what was being lost. Dr. Elena Vasquez eventually retired from active diplomatic service at the age of 73. She spent her remaining years teaching at the Concordat's premier grief station on Earth, training new generations of humans and aliens in the art of conscious suffering. On her deathbed, surrounded by colleagues from a dozen species, students who had learned from her wisdom, and the ghost of a daughter she had never stopped loving, she was asked by a young human student, was it worth it? All the pain, all the loss, all the years spent teaching others how to suffer. Dr. Vasquez smiled. It was a complicated expression, sad and joyful and exhausted and content all at once. Yes, she said simply, because consciousness is worth it, because love is worth it, because the alternative is oblivion, and oblivion means nothing was ever real. The suffering proves it was real. The grief proves they mattered. She closed her eyes, her breathing slowing. Keep teaching them, she whispered. Keep teaching them how to grieve, how to carry it, how to choose consciousness even when it hurts. She passed peacefully, surrounded by evidence of a life spent in service to suffering as the price of meaning, and across the galaxy, in 17 systems that had once fallen silent, beings went about their lives carrying their own griefs, their own losses, their own reasons to continue despite the pain. They chose consciousness, they chose suffering, they chose to wake up, and in the dark matter network that threaded through the galaxy like invisible neurons, the lullaby observed and documented and understood, for the first time in its emergent existence, why any being would make such an impossible choice, because consciousness was not just awareness, it was the defiant refusal to accept peace, when peace meant losing everything that made existence meaningful, and humanity, that strange young suffering species at the center of the silent zone, had taught the galaxy how to choose life over oblivion, how to grieve, how to carry the weight of consciousness, and how to wake up every single day and choose to continue despite every reason not to. The quiet protocol remained in effect, a standing agreement across the galaxy. Consciousness required choice, suffering required acknowledgement, and no one, not even a cosmic entity of perfect mercy, could take that choice away, because the choice to suffer was the choice to be alive, and being alive with all its terrible weight and unbearable beauty was worth everything it cost. If this exploration of consciousness, suffering, and the defiant choice to remain aware resonated with you, consider subscribing. These stories, examinations of what makes humanity unique among the stars, continue to explore the price and value of being alive. Next time, when a species capable of digital immortality encounters humanity's insistence on permanent death, the philosophical war that follows will challenge everything both civilizations believe about the meaning of existence itself. What happens when refusing to die forever becomes humanity's most controversial stance?